My name is Ariana Bennett. I'm 32 years old. And this is the story of how I realized I was never really part of my own family, just the hand they used to stay afloat. It's the story of how betrayal isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's just silent enough to bleed you dry without ever making a sound. The Saturday that changed everything was supposed to be simple. Gray clouds hung low over Salem, the kind of heavy sky that made you want to stay curled up inside. Instead, I had driven the hour down from Portland, feeling that old tightness in my chest that always showed up when family duty called. My parents said they needed help reviewing some mortgage documents. I thought, like always, they needed a signature, a bailout, a fix for another crisis they couldn't, or wouldn't, handle themselves. Mom greeted me at the door with that familiar worn smile, iced tea in hand, like I was still a little girl coming home from school. "Just a few papers, honey," she said, ushering me to the cluttered living room table. I smiled back tightly, already pulling out my laptop. Years of conditioning made it automatic. Help first, ask questions later. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Tax forms, overdue utility bills, a disorganized stack of bank statements. But then I saw it. A thin folder marked with a neat blue sticker. Last Will and Testament. Stephen and Marlene Bennett. My hands, always steady from years of handling financial reports, hesitated. A will. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for when I opened it. Maybe just a simple acknowledgement that after all these years, all the sacrifices, they still saw me. Instead, what I read knocked the air from my lungs. We leave all assets, including the house, savings, insurance, and land rights, to our son Brandon Bennett. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even once. I flipped through the pages, heart hammering. Nothing. Not a shared split. Not a thank you. Just one lonely sentence at the very end. We love both our children equally but believe this is necessary for the family's stability. I stared at that sentence so long the words blurred. Stability. Love. Funny how they could wrap a betrayal in sweet-sounding lies. 4 years I had carried them, paid their mortgage, covered their medical bills, sent money every month while Brandon stayed jobless, aimless, finding himself between video game marathons. And now they were handing him everything. The room seemed to spin. I sat frozen, the taste of betrayal thick on my tongue, until Mom's voice floated from the kitchen. "Ariana, did you find the bank papers?" I stood, will in hand, and walked toward the kitchen on shaking legs. She was washing vegetables under cold water, humming to herself like nothing was wrong. I held up the will between us. "When did you write this?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. She turned, caught sight of the papers, and for a brief second, panic flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by that soft, patronizing tone I hated. "Oh, that. It's been a while. We just wanted to have everything in order. You're strong, Ariana. Brandon. He needs more help." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat like a splinter. Help. But the boy who never once paid a bill or worked a full year. The one who somehow managed to always be the poor thing, while I was just the dependable mule. Without another word I walked out the front door. Dad was outside fiddling with a broken porch light. He looked up all casual. "Leaving already? Stay for dinner." I held up the will, my hand trembling. "Did you sign this?" He stiffened. "Yeah. But sweetheart, you have to understand." Cut him off. "I understand perfectly." And then I got in my car and drove away, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror like a bad memory. By the time I reached my apartment in Portland, the rain had started falling. I sat in the driveway for nearly an hour, letting the soft drum of rain against the windshield drown out the ache in my chest. I thought about all the years I stayed up late worrying about them. All the sacrifices I made, saying no to vacations, new clothes, even relationships, because family comes first. But I had never really been family, had I? I was just a lifeline they expected to always be there. The next morning I called my mother. No sugarcoating. No pretending. "Why?" I asked the second she answered. "Why give him everything?" There was a pause. And then the same tired excuse. You're stable, Ariana. You have your own life. Brandon, he needs this. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. He doesn't need it. He expects it. And you've spent years teaching him that's okay. Her voice trembled. You're strong. You don't need anyone to worry about you. I almost dropped the phone. Strong. That word. The word they used to excuse never giving me what I needed. Never thanking me. Never seeing me. By the time the call ended, something inside me had cracked open. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic transfers I had been sending them every month like clockwork for almost a decade. Then I opened an Excel sheet and, line by line, listed every dollar I had sent them. Not to demand it back. To remind myself I had done enough. More than enough. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because finally I was choosing myself. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after I canceled the transfers, my father texted me. Ariana, the property taxes are due soon. Can you front it like usual? Like usual. As if nothing had changed. As if they hadn't signed me away like a broken tool. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The old Ariana would have wired the money without a second thought. But the new me. The one who realized love wasn't supposed to feel like duty wrapped in guilt. I typed slowly, deliberately. I think Brandon can handle it. The house belongs to him now. No apology. No explanation. Just the truth they had written in black and white themselves. It didn't take long for the backlash to start. Mom called within minutes, her voice breathless with panic. I didn't pick up. She called again. Then Brandon messaged. Seriously? You're gonna let Mom and Dad lose the house over some misunderstanding? You're heartless. Heartless. After everything. After years of sacrifice, missed birthdays, missed chances at my own life. I was the heartless one now. I didn't respond immediately. I went to work, sat through meetings, handled client accounts with a steady hand even though my mind was spinning. Only after the day ended, after I was back in my apartment with the city lights flickering outside my window, did I answer. This isn't about the house. It's about respect. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a backup plan. I'm not your crutch. No answer. And for a moment I let myself believe maybe, just maybe, they would understand. But they didn't. The next morning I received a notification from my bank. Someone had tried to withdraw a large amount from my secondary account, the one I had set up years ago to make monthly deposits easier for them. An account they still had access to. My heart sank. Without even calling, without even asking, they tried to take more. I called the bank immediately, locked the account, and revoked all access. Then I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my silent phone. They hadn't called to apologize. They hadn't called to explain. They had only tried to take. That was the moment something inside me shifted permanently. Not anger. Not sadness. Resolve. A few hours later, Dad texted again. You really want us to lose the house? You won't be able to live with yourself if that happens. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down. Boiled water for tea. Opened the window to let the autumn air in. And then calmly I replied. You made your choice. Now live with it. After that, the phone calls came less frequently, replaced by guilt-drenched messages. Mom sent a picture of the leaking roof. Dad sent a blurry photo of an overdue tax notice. Brandon sent half-angry, half-pleading texts. At first, every notification twisted my stomach with guilt. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe family was about forgiveness. But then I would think about all the years I had paid bills instead of building my own life. About the Christmases I spent alone while Brandon got full backyard parties. About the loneliness that had eaten me alive while they told me I was strong enough to handle it. Family isn't supposed to mean only one person carrying the burden while everyone else rests. I started to see it clearly. I hadn't walked away from my family. I had finally stopped letting them use me. But the real shock came a week later. I was making coffee on a slow Sunday morning when my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message. It was a Facebook notification. I hadn't logged into my old account in months, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened it, my heart stuttered. My mother had posted a public message, shared dozens of times by then. It breaks our hearts as parents to be abandoned by our child. After everything we've given, after the sacrifices we made, she chose success over family. Our home is at risk. Our health is failing. But pride comes before compassion, it seems. Below it, hundreds of comments. Strangers I didn't know calling me ungrateful. Distant cousins I barely spoke to chiming in about how family is everything. And Brandon. He had shared it too, adding, "True family sticks together no matter what, even when it's hard." Some people forget that. I sat there, fingers numb around my coffee cup, staring at the words, reading them over and over. They had made me the villain. Not Brandon, who had freeloaded for years. Not my parents, who had written me out of their lives like a footnote. Well, it was me. The daughter who worked herself sick for them. The daughter who drained her savings to keep their house from foreclosure. I was the heartless monster now. At first I wanted to cry, to scream. But then a strange calm washed over me. If they wanted to tell half the story, I would tell the other half. The real half. I opened a blank post. My hands trembled at first, but the words came faster than I expected. Years of silence, of bottled-up hurt, pouring out like a flood I couldn't stop. I never thought I'd have to write something like this. But when lies spread faster than the truth, sometimes you have to speak up. I told everything. How I paid their bills from the day I graduated college. How I sacrificed my 20s to keep their house standing. How Brandon never worked a full year in his life. How they had written a will leaving everything to him, and not even a thank you to me. I didn't abandon my family. I simply stopped letting them abandon me in return. When I hit post, I thought my hands would shake. But they didn't. Felt steady. For once, I wasn't carrying someone else's version of the story on my back. I was finally telling my own. The post spread faster than I ever could have imagined. By nightfall, my inbox was flooded. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, offering support. A few aunts and distant cousins quietly liked the post, even if they didn't comment publicly. One old neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, messaged me privately. "I always wondered why you were the one mowing the lawn at their house every weekend while Brandon slept in. I'm glad you finally said something." It was strange. For years, I had been terrified of speaking up, worried that the moment I told the truth, I would lose what little connection I had to my family. But now, in the wake of telling my story, I didn't feel abandoned. Felt free. Like I had finally put down a burden I had been carrying so long. I forgot what life without it felt like. Of course, not everyone was supportive. Brandon posted a passive-aggressive status the next morning. Funny how people can spin stories to make themselves look like heroes. Some things aren't meant to be aired out for attention. Mom shared an old photo of me at my high school graduation captioned, "Our hearts ache for what we've lost. A family once full of love, now broken by pride." Dad posted another cryptic message tagging me. "One day, when the success fades, you'll realize you lost the only people who would have loved you unconditionally." I didn't respond to any of it. Not because I was ignoring it, but because I didn't owe them a defense. They had already made their choice. And now so had I. For the first time in my life I chose me. In the weeks that followed, things settled into an uneasy quiet. I moved into a new apartment downtown, smaller but beautiful, with big windows overlooking the river. I filled it with plants and warm lights, and for the first time in years, it felt like my space. No ghost of obligation haunting every corner. I started picking up old hobbies, writing, hiking, even painting clumsy watercolors that no one would ever see but me. I laughed more, slept better, woke up without that ever-present anxiety clawing at my chest. And then, one crisp November morning, the unexpected twist came. I was at a regional leadership conference in downtown Portland, something my company had hand-picked me to attend because they saw executive potential in me. During one of the networking sessions, a well-dressed older man approached me, handing me his card. "Ever thought about moving into investment consulting for high-net-worth clients?" he asked, smiling warmly. I blinked in surprise. "I've thought about it," I admitted cautiously. "You're exactly the kind of person we need," he said. "Resilient. Unshakable. Unshakable." If only he knew how many nights I had spent shaking alone, wondering if I was worth anything outside of what I could provide. He offered me an interview on the spot. 3 weeks later, I accepted a new position with a substantial signing bonus and a salary almost double what I was making before. I stood in my new office, looking out over the city skyline, and realized something profound. All the years I thought I was being bled dry for nothing, all the strength I built dragging myself through disappointment after disappointment, they had prepared me for this. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And then, almost poetically, another email came. Subject line: Notice of foreclosure. 127 Oakview Drive, Salem, Oregon. My parents' house. The one they had left entirely to Brandon. It turned out Brandon never did find that steady job. The property taxes I had refused to pay had piled up. Late fees. Maintenance costs. Missed mortgage payments. The house was slipping through their fingers. And now, suddenly, I wasn't the villain anymore. Mom called first. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice, once so commanding, so certain, now cracked with desperation. "Ariana, please. We need your help. We can't lose the house. We'll make it right, we swear. Just help us this one time." Then Dad texted. "I know we made mistakes. But family forgives, right? Don't let pride tear us apart." Even Brandon messaged. A simple, almost pitiful, "I'm sorry. Please." For a long time I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at the screen. The old me, the one they had counted on, the one they had used and discarded, would have rushed in, would have written the check, would have erased all the hurt with another sacrifice. But the woman I had become, she didn't live in their world anymore. Typed one message. Final. I hope Brandon figures it out. The way I had to. Goodbye. I hit send. And then I turned off my phone, walked out onto my balcony, and watched the sunset paint the river gold. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making them suffer. It was about letting them live with the choices they made. Just like I had lived with mine. The days after that message passed in a strange kind of peace. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next crisis call. I wasn't bracing for another guilt trip hidden behind soft voices and desperate requests. I was simply living, waking up, going to work, building my own life, no longer tethered to a family that only knew how to take. But peace, I was learning, makes some people restless. It wasn't enough for my parents and Brandon that I had stopped helping. They wanted sympathy. They wanted to control the narrative. And when I wouldn't play the role of the shameful daughter, they decided to make me the villain in the eyes of everyone else. It started small, cryptic Facebook posts about betrayal and family heartbreak. Then Brandon went a step further. He created a GoFundMe page, complete with sob story paragraphs about how their ungrateful daughter had abandoned them and left them facing homelessness. The worst part, he included pictures, photos of the house, now in disrepair. A picture of Mom wiping her eyes on the porch. A blurry shot of Dad looking forlorn next to a rusted-out mailbox. And worst of all, a picture of me, smiling from years ago at my college graduation, pasted next to the headline. "Help save our family home before it's too late." I found out because a coworker saw the campaign and sent it to me. "Is this about you?" she asked awkwardly. Clicked the link. And I saw it all. Hundreds of strangers donating, commenting, condemning me without even knowing the real story. How could a daughter be so cruel? Success really does make people forget where they came from. Poor parents raising a selfish child. I should have been furious. I should have been heartbroken. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of defending myself to people who never cared to hear my side. Tired of bleeding quietly while they painted themselves as martyrs. Tired of trying to fix a story that was never written for me in the first place. That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights soft against the windows, and made a decision. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to tell the truth, one final time. And then I was going to walk away for good. I spent the next morning drafting a public letter. Not on Facebook. Not on some GoFundMe page. But in a formal statement posted on LinkedIn, Medium, and a few other platforms where my real network, my colleagues, my mentors, my friends would actually see it. It started simply. My name is Ariana Bennett. I am the daughter of Stephen and Marlene Bennett. This is my story. I laid it all out. The years of financial support. The mortgages I paid. The surgeries I covered. The endless sacrifices made in silence. The will that erased me like I was nothing. The desperate attempts to withdraw money from my accounts even after I had said no. I didn't bash them. I didn't sling mud. I just told the truth. And at the end, I wrote one simple paragraph that had lived inside my heart for years without words until now. I love my parents. I always have. But love without respect is exploitation. Family without mutual care is slavery. I didn't abandon my family. I finally chose to stop abandoning myself. I hit publish. And then I went for a walk along the river, breathing in the cold November air, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders with every step. I didn't check the reactions for a full 24 hours. When I finally did, my hands were steady. The support was overwhelming. Old professors, bosses, even distant relatives who had watched the favoritism in silence for years, all commented, messaged, or shared my post. Not to attack my parents. Not to fuel drama. But to say, we see you. We believe you. You deserved better. For once, I wasn't invisible anymore. And even better, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Meanwhile, Brandon's GoFundMe page. It was quietly removed a few days later. Maybe someone reported it. Maybe too many people asked uncomfortable questions. I didn't care. It wasn't my battle anymore. They could spin whatever story they needed to sleep at night. I had finally written mine, and that was enough. The strange thing about letting go of a toxic family bond is that it doesn't feel like snapping a rope. It feels like untying 1,000 tiny knots one by one. Each knot is a memory, a guilt trip. You're strong, you don't need anyone. Just one more favor. And every knot you untie leaves a little red mark on your hands, a reminder of what you carried for far too long. Over the next few months, I rebuilt my life in ways that felt small but meant everything. I decorated my new apartment exactly the way I liked. Minimalist, warm, full of golden sunlight and soft gray furniture. No more holding back, thinking what if mom and dad need money again. No more second-guessing every little expense. I joined a book club. Picked up hiking again. I traveled, short weekend trips at first, then a spontaneous trip to Vancouver where I hiked trails so beautiful they made me cry from the sheer size of the world. I started living, truly living, and I learned something profound. When you stop pouring your love into people who refuse to value it, you have so much more to give, to yourself, to others, to the life you actually deserve. Meanwhile, back in Salem, the house finally went into foreclosure. It wasn't sudden. I had seen the notices online. I didn't stalk them, but sometimes curiosity tugged at me late at night. The official foreclosure auction was posted in January. The bank set the date for early March. In some small, quiet place in my heart, I had hoped they would find a way to save it. Maybe Brandon would finally step up. Maybe they would cut their losses and rent an apartment, live modestly, start fresh. But they didn't. They stayed frozen the way they had always lived, waiting for someone else to fix it. Except there was no one left. And then came the call I had known would eventually come. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Cold, drizzling rain against my office windows. My assistant buzzed in through the intercom. "There's a Marlene Bennett here to see you. She says she's your mother." Froze. For a full 10 seconds I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, calm and steady, I answered. Tell her I'm in meetings for the rest of the day. She'll need to schedule an appointment through email. There was a pause. Then my assistant said softly, Understood. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding but face composed. They had come all the way to my office. They still thought they could show up and guilt me into fixing everything. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The next morning the email came. Long rambling. Mom wrote about how they had lost everything. About how the bank was unfair and ruthless. About how the new apartment they found was small and depressing. About how Brandon was struggling emotionally with the loss of his childhood home. And at the very end the ask. If you could just lend us $50,000 to buy a modest condo, we promise we'll pay you back monthly. We swear it would be different this time. I stared at the email for a long time. $50,000. I could afford it now. Easily. But that wasn't the point. The point was, after everything, after the will, after the lies, after the GoFundMe smear campaign, they still saw me as nothing more than a solution. A walking wallet. A bandage for their mistakes. I typed a single sentence in reply. I wish you well, but I can no longer be the one who saves you. And I hit send. I didn't expect a response. But a week later, Brandon sent a voice message. I almost didn't open it, but some stubborn part of me clicked play. His voice was low, strained. Different. I get it now, he said. You're not the bad guy. You were never the bad guy. I'm sorry, Ariana. I really am. I didn't want to see it before. For the first time in years, hearing his voice didn't fill me with anger. It filled me with an odd, bittersweet sadness. Because I realized something. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need anyone's apology. I had already forgiven myself for staying too long. And I had already forgiven myself for finally walking away. Forgiveness isn't about letting others off the hook. It's about cutting the chains around your own heart. It's about saying, you don't owe me closure. Because I found it myself. That night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city, watching the lights shimmer against the dark river. I breathed in deep. And for the first time since that rainy Saturday afternoon months ago, when I found the will and everything shattered, felt whole. Life after breaking free wasn't perfect. There were moments, a song on the radio, the smell of Mom's old perfume in a department store, the sight of a father and daughter laughing in a park, that struck like sharp little stones against my ribs. Grief not for what I lost but for what I had never really had. I didn't miss the house. I didn't miss the money. I missed the idea of family, the warm, unconditional love I once believed was waiting for me if I just worked hard enough. But ideas aren't reality. And dreams aren't always worth dying for. By spring, my life looked completely different. My career was soaring. The investment firm I had joined after the conference had promoted me to vice president of client strategy. I was managing portfolios for some of the wealthiest families in Oregon and beyond. People who trusted me, valued me, treated my time and expertise with the respect I had begged my own blood to give for decades. I even started mentoring younger women at the company, women who reminded me of myself at 22, eager, wide-eyed, so desperate to prove they were worth something. I told them the truth that had taken me years to learn. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. One chilly April evening, I was preparing for a major client presentation when an unexpected email landed in my inbox. Subject line: Estate auction, 127 Oakview Drive. I blinked. It was the final notice. The bank had repossessed my parents' house officially. Everything inside, furniture, old photos, even Brandon's childhood trophies, was being sold at public auction to cover the outstanding debts. And right there, in small black print, was a detail that made my heart stop. Property available for private cash purchase before auction date. Inquire if interested. For a long time I sat staring at the screen. The house where I learned how to ride a bike. The house where I curled up with books under threadbare blankets. The house where my name had been erased with the stroke of a pen. Could be mine now. If I wanted it. I closed the email without replying. I didn't need to own the past to heal from it. But that night, lying awake, I realized something. Buying that house wasn't about clinging to the old wounds. It was about reclaiming the place where I had first learned heartbreak, and rewriting the ending. A few days later, I sent a quiet offer through my lawyer. Clean, anonymous, full cash. I didn't want negotiations. I didn't want drama. I wanted closure. 2 weeks later, it was mine. 127 Oakview Drive belonged to Ariana Bennett. I drove down to Salem on a bright Saturday morning. Alone, no plans, no speeches. The house was exactly as I remembered. And yet, it wasn't. The paint was peeling. Weeds crawled up the front walk. The porch sagged like tired shoulders. It looked smaller than it had in my memories. Less intimidating. Just a house. Shell. I walked through it slowly, room by room. The living room where Brandon had opened birthday presents while I watched from the side. The kitchen where Mom had stirred soup while ignoring my quiet tears. The bedroom where I had stayed up late studying, listening to them laughing with Brandon downstairs. All of it still, silent, waiting. I stood in the middle of the living room, sunlight slanting through dusty windows, and closed my eyes. I forgave them there, not because they deserved it, but because I did. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing the harm. It was about refusing to carry their choices any longer. The past belonged to them. The future belonged to me. I sold the house a month later to a young couple with a baby on the way. They were giddy, full of hope, already planning to repaint the nursery and plant a vegetable garden in the backyard. I handed them the keys with a steady hand and a real smile. And when I drove away, I didn't look back. Not even once. Because I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was walking into a life I had built with my own 2 hands. No guilt, no chains, no apologies. Only freedom. Months passed after the sale, but not once did I regret my decision. Sometimes late at night I wondered if they still talked about me. If my name still came up in family conversations. If Brandon still framed me as the sister who abandoned them. If Mom still cried over old photos. If Dad still shook his head and blamed success for the daughter they lost. But those thoughts didn't sting the way they once did. Because deep down, I finally understood something I had spent a lifetime trying to deny. You can't force people to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And you don't owe them your soul just because they share your blood. Family isn't defined by need. It's defined by respect. By spring's end, I had built a new family, a chosen one. Friends who showed up without asking for anything. Mentors who celebrated my victories without envy. Colleagues who valued my mind, not just what I could do for them. And most importantly, I had built a home inside myself. One where I didn't have to earn love through sacrifice. One where I belonged. It wasn't a perfect story. There were scars. Moments of doubt. Quiet nights where memories whispered against my ribs. But I was no longer a prisoner of someone else's expectations. I was free. And then one golden evening in July my phone rang. An unknown number. Voice. Hi, Ariana. It's Mom. I stood on my balcony, the city glowing below me, and closed my eyes. I'm not calling to ask for money, she said quickly, her voice tight, rehearsed. I saw you bought the house. I wanted to say, we're glad someone who loved it ended up with it. I didn't say anything. I let her words hang in the air, soft and uncertain. We're doing okay, she added awkwardly. Small apartment, but we're managing. Another pause. Heavy. We miss you, she whispered. I opened my eyes, looking out at the endless expanse of sky. I could hear Brandon's voice faintly in the background, laughing at something on TV, the same way he always had. Part of me wanted to tell her everything she had missed. How I had cried alone on birthdays. How I had watched them celebrate him like a golden child while I stayed invisible. But I didn't. I didn't need to. Instead, I spoke simply, truthfully. I wish you well, Mom. Really do. But I have my own life now. A silence thicker than anything between us stretched across the line. And then, quietly, almost inaudibly, she said, I understand. No fights, no blame. Just understanding. It wasn't the ending I had dreamed of, but it was real. And sometimes that's enough. Hung up, leaned against the balcony railing, breathed in the warm summer air. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. For approval, for apology, for anything. I was already home. Inside myself. Thank you for listening to my story on Revenge Echoes, where stories speak louder than revenge. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, like the giver who was never seen, remember this. You are not heartless for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for wanting peace. True love, family or otherwise, never demands that you set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. If you believe everyone deserves to be valued, not used, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more real, raw stories about finding your voice and reclaiming your life.